Wall Street rallying to its best day in months on Friday. This, of course, after Jerome Powell, head of the Federal Reserve, hinting at an interest rate cut that could be on the way. What did you make of his Jackson Hole remarks?
Well, first of all, good to be with you this morning. And yeah, the street celebrated in a big way on Friday because we got the sentiment that we wanted from Jay Powell, which was it's time to make a change. And there was a lot of volatility in determining whether or not that was going to happen. There was some dissent among some of the Fed governors. We looked at the minutes from the July meeting. That CME tool that we use to determine what the Fed's going to do was going up and down, 85% chance, 65% chance. We are comfortably at an 85% chance this morning. We're going to get that first cut we need so desperately in September.
We've been waiting and waiting, and President Trump has been begging and begging for a cut. But Rebecca, the U.S. government making an $8.9 billion investment in Intel stock, giving the Trump administration a whopping 10% of Intel stock in control. Rebecca, what do you think of this announcement, and what will this new deal kind of look like with the government now involved?
Yeah, this is a sea change. You know, President Trump basically said we paid nothing for this deal. So that $8.9 billion that you're talking about, $5.3 billion was from the CHIPS Act under the Biden administration, another $3 billion plus from the Department of Defense. And so technically we're not buying the shares, but what's happening here is that we're actually getting ownership of a publicly traded company, Intel, for you know, a grant that is done at the federal level, and this is to keep these manufacturing plants in the United States, to make a commitment to manufacturing these semiconductor chips in the United States. And it really reminds me more of like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, where their sovereign wealth fund. They do these things at the government level, they fund them at the government level, and then they get ownership rights. And that's a unique arrangement for the United States. I'm sure it will be litigated. I'm sure this will go to the Supreme Court in some capacity. But to be honest, you know, if you look at Powell's comments from Jackson Hole on Friday, there was an undertone of we really kind of need to be more accommodative, which everyone in the market loved, of course, to Marc's point. But also, he also very mildly indicated that the 2% inflation is going to be problematic. It's very problematic to have an accommodative Fed, increasing stimulus, and yet maintain very extremely low inflation. So we are looking at a sea change, and I think this Trump administration is really trying to find a unique way forward to basically get our bang for our buck in our country.
Yeah, Marc, you've been nodding your head. I would love for you to weigh in on this.
Well, I often agree with Rebecca, and it's unfortunate we're not together on set this morning as we were on Friday. But yeah, listen, I think this is a great move. This is part of President Trump's Manhattan Project, as it's been referred to. And it's not just about, as Rebecca says, she's completely right, making investments that make sense like so many other countries do with their sovereign wealth funds. By the way, President Trump's talked about establishing a sovereign wealth fund here in the United States, which I'm all in favor of. But this is also recognition of the fact that chips like this, Intel in particular, are actually vital not only to our economic security, but to our national security. I was talking to the CEO of a drone maker the other day, publicly traded, so I can't say which one, and he was lamenting the fact that so many of the drones, the majority of the drones used by our U.S. military, have chips in them that were made in China. That is an unbelievable vulnerability. It's got to change. President Trump recognizes the need to do that in a profitable way.
Which is huge. Again, our national security, just absolutely vital. But switching gears here, Nissan delaying its production of their 3 new electric SUVs. This at its Mississippi plant until 2028, citing customer demand and market timing as the reason. This comes as the president really signed the big, beautiful bill axing those EV tax incentives for customers. You know, Rebecca, what can the average consumer really anticipate from this move? Is there still a high demand for these EVs?
I mean, I think that there will be, and it is coming, but, you know, we have electrical grid problems in the United States, so that's kind of a problem. We've seen, obviously, Tesla, you know, sales go down immensely, and Nissan is saying that has nothing to do with the big, beautiful bill, but let's be honest, they were really relying, they're really a lot more accepted in Europe and Japan, and they were really relying on these EV credits to boost demand in the United States, to really aid them in that demand, and if it's not going to be there, then they're saying, well, you know, we have a lot more demand in Japan. We'll go ahead and, because they're moving out of Tennessee, we'll make these in Japan, and we won't have to necessarily rely on the EV credits in the United States. But obviously, you know, this is the wave of the future. Autonomous vehicles are really going to be what's really going to take over the market in the next 5 to 10 years. And so this is just going to set Nissan back in the United States for that transition to autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. Marc, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Fantastic conversation.